Hello again, Steve here with a few thoughts. I just had 15 minutes to wait to have something done in a machine shop here. So I figured I'd just use the time to say hello, share some ideas on improving the quality of our life experiences. I may have mentioned in a previous video that I had just listened to an audio book which was originally written by Henry David Thoreau. This guy, you could call him maybe a philosopher and maybe an idealist, this sort of thing. He's the guy who is quoted as saying, most men lead lives of quiet desperation. And his book, Walden, I think is a fantastic book, not the least of which for the reason that it's a wonderful work of literature, but also it's got a lot of takeaways in there. He starts his book out by saying something along the lines of, I went into the woods so that I could learn to live deliberately. And of course he spent 2 years in the woods deliberately, lived by his own hands and his own resources, essentially. Getting in touch with nature, sort of thing. You might want to call him a naturalist, if you want to use personalities in there. Now, I want to talk a little bit about how we could probably build up people more with hugs than with anything. More with hugs than with teaching them all about our wisdom and our religions and our societal norms. And hugs that say I love you probably would do more for humanity than anything. Now, Henry David talked about at one point in his book about how he would go to town once in a while. Of course, he lived in the wilderness, but he was within several miles of a town, Concord, Massachusetts at the time. And he used to notice along the lines of how people were about as interesting as ants. At one point in his book, he talked about how he watched a war taking place between two tribes of ants, the red ants against the black ants, and they fought furiously on an ongoing basis. And he found that listening to humanity was very similar. There was very little he could actually talk to about anybody, but he just liked to observe and just watch how prevalent gossip was in this sort of thing. And how most people in business and who were farming and whatever they were doing for their business, they didn't really care about much other than the profit for whatever reason of it all. And so you might say part of the treatise that I got from the whole thing was that the work of the world, the most important work of the world, is largely left undone, untouched, and has vast potential to be worked on. You know, we as human beings, we explore all kinds of things. We explore technology, we explore the cosmos, we explore the microcosms and all that. But so rarely do we introspect and become contemplative within the world that's within us. And I would think one of the reasons is because we've been traumatized as children in so many ways. I don't necessarily mean overt ways, but we as parents, myself included, talked the line always that I was just too busy to give the required time to the children. It's becoming known more and more, and thanks to the works of people like Dr. Gabor Mate in Vancouver, who works with drug addicts on the downtown east side, and that people who are not given the requisite love and affection as children end up to that extent traumatized. He talks, for example, about how of the people he's worked with, in this particular case, females on the downtown east side who are drug addicted prostitutes, 100% of them, universally, unanimously, they have been sexually abused as children. So it doesn't take a big step to realize that what's going on in people's lives that is not so desirable from that individual's perspective, probably, and certainly from the community, a community of people's perspective. What's going on is the result of what has gone on, and therefore there is an attempt to self-medicate in some way. He also talked, Dr. Gabor Mate, that is, and you can look up his talks. He's very much of an activist to get out this necessary information about self-knowledge. He also talks about how oh, I missed a thought there. Oh yeah, the obesity epidemic. The obesity epidemic has really picked up as a result of the breakdown of the family. Where the Western world, the family has imploded basically, and there's huge amounts of dysfunction that come from that. And add to that the food industry. The food industry, especially the junk food industry, puts a lot of research into finding out what chemicals they can put in the food that will trigger those comfort centers in the body. So, in a way, when we look at people who are obese, rather than seeing them as slothful and so on, if we'd be more apt to see them as people who have been traumatized in some way. And what was interesting about what Dr. Gabor Mate said is that a lot of times obesity is also a sexual self-defense. There is some sort of a repulsion against that for whatever reason, the trauma that took place in childhood, so that being obese is like a defense against that. I thought that was interesting. But all of these, all of what's going on in our lives, our troubles, if you will, are the result of us not being aware of our potential largely. I mean, the things that can be affected, that is, the things that can be affected by our actions and our thoughts and this sort of thing, right? But they go very deep. Dr. Gabor Mate also says that there's almost like a carryover generation to generation. He made the point that children of Holocaust survivors have a heightened level of certain anyways, I gotta cut this off here.